Welcome to Drink Beer, Think Beer, the podcast that gets to the bottom of every pint. I'm John Hall. After years of patiently waiting and thinking about blends, Trillium released its spontaneous beer just before the holidays. Brewer and co-founder JC Tetreault talks about the beer, the business, culinary inspirations, farming, and more. But first up, we're able to bring you this show every week thanks to these sponsors. This dry January, party on all month long with Athletic Brewing Company's great tasting non-alcoholic craft beer. Their full lineup of craft styles lets you drink up and stay dry while keeping things fresh. And with brews starting at only 50 calories, you can stick to your resolutions all while saying cheers. Join the party at athleticbrewing.com and get free shipping on 2 6-packs or more. Plus, new customers can get 10% off with code BEEREDGE10. And we're also brought to you by NZ Hops, a cooperative of master growers whose legend and cultivars have been crafted for over 150 years with creativity and passion to produce some of the world's finest hops. With a dedicated hop breeding program and farming knowledge handed down through the generations, the current day master growers proudly provide 18 unique New Zealand hop varieties to the world. Visit nzhops.co.nz, or you can find them on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn at NZHops Ltd to learn more. For a brewery that's less than a decade old, it's been a hell of a ride for Trillium in Massachusetts. From a small, cramped space near Boston's waterfront to now a growing roster of locations, including restaurants and a farm, the brewery has been celebrated and scrutinized, but always focused. This is most apparent in the beers themselves. Sure, there's the hazies and the big imperial stouts, but there's also beers that celebrate the agriculture around them or play with ingredients like wine grapes and honey. So that JC Tetreault did a spontaneous blend in the Belgian tradition shouldn't be a surprise. That the beers are elegant and fun to drink shouldn't be a surprise either. These beers, as all of the growth, is deliberate and is a push towards a goal that's been coming more and more into focus over the years. Beers aside, JC, who founded the brewery with his wife Ester, have also been trying to build a better beer community and culture, even recently hosting a symposium on best practices to eliminate the sexist undertones and overtones that have been in and around the beer space. We recorded this in mid-January, a week after Monster Energy Drinks bought the company behind Cigar City, Oscar Blues, Perrin, and others. And the sale of Bell's towards the end of 2021 was still fresh in many minds. And so I started off by asking him if offers to sell ever arrived in his inbox. Here's our conversation.
I don't know if it's been recently. There were folks that came sniffing around, I don't know, maybe a few years ago. We're always happy to get on a call and talk to people, just because the craft brewing industry has been largely a kind of, generally for Ester and I, has been a largely welcoming and friendly place. So you just, it feels weird to just say, no, I don't want to talk to you. So we do take the phone call, and we're happy to kind of talk to them and but describe to them how we came to be and how we operate now. And usually towards the end of that 10-minute or so conversation, they realize they don't really have anything to offer us, or could see that there's not something that we would gain from selling the brewery. And it's never been our intention, and still isn't our intention, to sell Trillium. We started it to kind of build a community and to build a life for Ester and our family. And that has only grown and strengthened in the time that we've been operating. So
in the last 2 years now, we're coming up on 2 years since the pandemic really sort of hit our shores and have been impacting. You talk about building a community. How has that been impacted?
Well, I think what kind of, like for a lot of things, it's put a lot of projects or ideas that we've had on hold or pause or just change the way we're able to execute them in the near term. We've it's really kind of grown and expanded as we've grown the team, and to understand the perspective of others, and kind of reaching out into the community and having more conversations with different folks that we wouldn't normally have the occasion to talk to. So that expanding process has happened. And it's just like an overall maturation of the industry. And it's no longer a community. The idea of kind of welcoming community is no longer opening a place, opening your doors and seeing who might come in. Just making sure that you're doing things that people can see as being warm and welcoming, and being very specific about that. That's an important thing. Now, there's actual engagements and those kinds of things. Women in the workplace, and understanding what harassment means, and what the average white guy and what his role might be in all of this. Having certainly, like, broader company communications go out is an important thing. But having human one-on-one conversations has been very much another, and super important. And listening and understanding has been something that's picked up a ton, not just within our own walls, but within some of our customer base, and to some of our friends, and just some new folks that we've met within the industry too. And really kind of breaking down the walls of understanding that, craft brewing, and, now we're blurring the lines into restaurants and hospitality.
Yeah.
And, when we had when Ester had her group here of various folks across a bunch of different industries, and professionals within the legal and HR setting, to discuss openness and harassment and within the workplace here, we invited a ton of our kind of peripheral vendors, some of our law firms and real estate folks and banks, and those kinds of people came in to understand, because we're all part of the community. We're all going through the same kind of human experience in our different settings, and we learned as much from them as they learned from their experience here, and it sort of re-inspired everybody to feel good about having an actionable plan about how to make things better, and just having more front of mind conscious awareness of what their role might be, and not, I feel this way, so that my work is done here. So, which it very much is not.
Yeah. Do you think it's working? Have you seen signs that these conversations are actually starting to sprout some roots? Well,
is it working question is, it's always going to be 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Mm-hmm. I think that we're all flawed and we're all fallible. So is it going to be there's no switch to flip, because it already would have been flipped a long time ago. I think these changes are unfortunately way slower and maybe multi-generational mm-hmm. than what we wish they could be. But it does, to me, feel like we're going in the right direction. I mean, the conversations that we have with our kids are not even close to what I had with my parents, or Esther had with her parents.
Yeah, same.
I think that it just takes, we're all going through the human experience. It's just going to take time for those kinds of things to kind of take root during people's formative years, and have their values formed or evolved or changed. It just is going to take some time. And knowing that, what kind of pretexts are we going to set up within our own organization to make sure that we are that we're very upfront and set clear expectations for people who join the team, or for guests who come to visit us, what their experience is going to be here, and if and when things fall outside of those parameters, we've got a predetermined approach and how to handle that. And that has been, having, like I said, having that actionable plan. This all sounds very kind of parochial and protocol oriented. But if you're not prepared for when things happen that fall outside of what your community standards are, then you failed as a leader. So we spent heck of a lot of time and energy making sure that we've got all those kinds of things in place.
And that's for inside of your walls. But I've been talking with a lot of folks because it sounds like there are the right moves and the right conversations happening at a lot of places internally. But then there's the customer experience, and then there's customer expectations of, showing up and standing in line for beer and basically just being good, decent humans. Have you thought much on a brewery's role or a brewery's ability to communicate? Like, I don't even know if it's like your expectations, if it's consumer expectations, but obviously you want people to, who are lining up for your beer to be good humans. Is that a conversation you're having? Is that something you're thinking about?
I think it's an interesting way to frame it as well. I think that there's a little bit of good in everybody, hopefully.
I hope so.
And hopefully people are on some kind of path to kind of getting better as they evolve and grow. So I don't know that there's necessarily a designation except for, some clear definitions of what it means to be a sociopath. I don't know that there's exactly a clear, people make mistakes, and it's not an appropriate thing to just brand somebody permanently as a bad person, or to kind of put somebody up on a pedestal and say, oh, that's a great example of a good person that only does good. I think that's a dangerous mindset to be in. I think having a perspective of the need for forgiveness or the ability to think that way is a hugely important thing. So, kind of like permanently branding somebody as a pariah is a little bit much. However, making things, taking action when there's not good things happening is important for everybody else who may be impacted by those kinds of actions, and to make that person understand that what they've done, whether intentional or not, or at least front of mind or not, is a behavior that's not to be tolerated. And you know what? Hopefully that makes that person stop, reflect, and think twice about becoming a better person. Yeah.
You mentioned before, it's not, with expansion and everything that you've had going on in the last couple of years, it's not enough to just sort of open up the doors and see who might come in. When you first opened up the small little brewery, did you have an idea of who might show up, or was that the last time you could actually just open a door and hope for the best?
Yeah, I mean, Jesus, that's like what feels like a lifetime ago. I mean, it's not been 10 years, but it almost seems like that happened to somebody else at this point. It's getting a little hard to remember what my mind state was like. I had two young kids. By young, I mean, Elena was 6 months old, I think, and Luke was about 2 years old. I'm working a full-time job that included 1 to 2 weeks of international travel a month, and we're building a brewery, hiring a team, setting up. I was pretty crispy at that point. What I was hoping for was that the local community, folks who lived and worked in Fort Point, were gonna hopefully show up and buy enough beer so that we could make another batch, and that was the first bar of success that I could hope for, and really truly had that was all the energy I had to even really think about. Now fast forward to today, that perspective of what kind of should we be doing to make sure that anybody and everybody not only feels but knows that they're welcome when they come in our doors. That's a different perspective, and something that we've certainly built on since those first few days.
Where you are now versus where you are then, when it comes to the beers that you're putting out, is this where you want it to be?
Yeah. I mean,
when you look at your overall portfolio?
Yeah, it's so cool when we first started, even in the first in the first few months, and in terms of like what we thought we would be able to make one day into where we are is really, really crazy. So, we started, it sounds kind of silly now. We started with 2 10-barrel fermenters, and like that's that was all the money that we had that we could afford. We planned to start with 6 10-barrel fermenters, but we had to cut our budget and scale that back to 2 because the opening took so long, and we were just bleeding money through with rent and employee paychecks, and just like ran out of money. And to where we are today with multiple breweries, I was
going to say, do you have any idea what your cellar capacity is these days?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay.
Batch sizes anywhere from 1 barrel up to 135 barrels, and then spanning all different styles and categories, kind of more accurate historical representations of beers to modern interpretations, or even quote unquote new styles of beer. That's kind of what Esther and I had dreamed about when we thought about Trillium being a modern New England farmhouse inspired brewery. Everything from more traditional lagers all the way through these incredible double barrel aged, use of real culinary ingredient stouts, through traditional spontaneous, kind of goose inspired 3-year blends that we're now able to come through today. I'm a fan of beer and everything that it was and is today and can be into the future. So to apply that lens of modern New England farmhouse to everything that we do is such it's like a dream come true. And I'm still a home brewer at heart. So I'm so interested and excited by all these different things. And that's what we're able to actually do today. And it's a little bit like winning the lottery, John.
When you talk to people, when you talk to customers, talk to drinkers and beer fans, is there a uniform thread as to what they think your brewery is? Because you just described, like a modern New England farmhouse, but then, you're getting into pastry stouts. You're talking about IPAs. You're talking about spontaneous. Like there's so many different spokes in the wheel of the brewery. Is there like a Venn diagram of brewery customers, brewery fans, that, Trillium's in the middle, but they're all coming in for something else? Or is there one uniform thread that sort of brings people in?
I think it's, there is a Venn diagram, and where that overlap comes in, it's everybody's here for what they're seeking. It sounds like, oh, that's a painfully obvious statement. But I think that people really love the variety, and that there is going to be something for everybody in your group. And that to me is the embodiment of what we're trying to achieve and being welcoming. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with there being a very kind of stylistically focused brewery. I think it's a really cool and distinct and unique experience. But it may not necessarily feel super welcoming to everybody. And whether that's a list of 12 different hazy beers or a list of 12 different, hyper historically accurate Franconian lagers. It's awesome.
Yeah.
But it's not for anybody and everybody. If you want to come with a diverse group of people with experiences that span in a huge range, it's going to be a little limiting. So at the same time, the concern is you can't be everything to everybody. Which is true. So there's always going to be a limitation. Those limitations are largely a reflection of what makes what the reality is of the volumes of the kinds of people that are coming in for certain styles of beer. So we only have certain kinds of equipment and only so many hours in the day to produce beers that we can't lose money on, because we're still a business. We're not a nonprofit here. So we still have to be able to make money. So that there are limitations there. But we're always trying to find and strike that balance to be that reflection of what the community wants for us. Now, people will think of Trillium as probably our, if you want to call them our loudest beers, but I think we're equally proud as some of our kind of more subtle and distinctive beers that we've made. And I do think that there is going to be a pendulum swing. There already is a pendulum swing back towards those styles of beers, which everybody is super stoked on. Doesn't mean that the variety and range of beers that we're going to be making is going to lessen or necessarily increase over time. It's just going to be it's going to follow that evolution of what the craft beer drinker is looking for.
You brought up something interesting in my mind, though, of when I think about the restaurant, when I think about 4 Point, it was going beyond beer, right? You had a full bar there the last time I visited, if I'm remembering correctly.
Nope. No, we still have.
Or was it just wine?
It's wine and beer. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
We don't yet have the distillery online.
Sorry. So in the wine sense, though, have you been able to, there's always this, how do you get wine drinkers to drink more beer? Were you able, with your wine selection there, to have beer drinkers try different wines?
So people are, by and large coming to Trillium because we were founded as, and still are known very much as, a brewery. So, are we able to, I don't want to say transition people to wine. We certainly are happy to offer, but we're not necessarily trying to kind of suggest wine over beer. Because we are operating 2 restaurants, we certainly will make suggestions if people are asking for them, or if there's just something that we have on the menu, a special or one of our regularly available dishes that really does best with a glass of wine, then we certainly will suggest that. I think that we typically will see far more customers that are excited to try something, which is such an incredible opportunity for us, both on the culinary side as well as on the beverage side. So I think that people are stoked to get a suggestion from us. So it's more about making sure that our hospitality program and our culinary program and our bar managers are very well aligned with understanding what that is. We're not trying to do anything beyond just make something the best experience for the individual, and trying to understand them a little bit before we can make those kinds of suggestions.
Does hard seltzer fit into the culinary aspect of any of this?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, the way that we make them, I think that rightfully so, hard seltzer gets a grimace from beverage enthusiasts.
Yeah.
Because in, how it first came through with quote unquote natural flavors, they just taste like you're licking a freaking air freshener. They're awful, awful things.
I don't know if I've ever actually done that, but I
you can imagine
what you're
right,
saying.
John?
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Because that's
for research. Yeah. We all went down to the car wash. Everybody picked out their favorite flavor. Yeah.
Oh my God. It's truly offensive to me personally. Now I know people who really love those things, and it's
word choice.
Yeah. it's kind of like what you grew up on. So Dunkin' Donuts makes French vanilla and hazelnut coffee, and God damn it, if real vanilla and real hazelnut taste nothing like those things,
right?
But if you grew up with it, then maybe you've got an affinity for it. And they just, personally, I just find them really difficult.
So when you set out with Soak, then you wanted to make it not that. You wanted to have some authenticity behind it.
Yeah, it wasn't exactly like this, it wasn't like an Einstein moment. It's just like, oh, instead of using fake flavorings, just like we don't use those in our beers, why don't we use real ingredient? So if we can use real pineapple or real cranberry, then if we can figure out how to make that taste and smell and have the right texture, and then that's a viable thing. So we set off on a almost 2-year process to develop that. And it really did take us that long. We probably were doing pilot batches 3-4 times a month in order to get everything down to where we felt really good and really confident that we had something that was up to our own expectations to share with folks.
There's been the conversations of seltzer waning a bit or consolidating just among the larger players with the smaller players, smaller producers not having quite the market share. Do you see longevity at least what you're making?
Yeah, it's super hard for me to like really understand. I'm not like following IRI data or anything like that, so I don't really know, if Bud Light Seltzer is up or down or hitting expectations. I thought I saw something in the news about Sam Adams, dumping a whole bunch of Truly because it's out of date code or whatever.
Yeah,
we don't see that sort of stuff. We kind of we're more closely managing our production, and we do obviously have volume projections. So, but we're only a year or so into it, so our projections are only as good as our most recent sales are, which are pretty good. They're standard. I mean, not standard. They're really steady. So, and of course, are seasonal as well. So, it's hard for me to know or comment on what the future of this is. I do know that it's just another thing that people are going to expect to be there, and it really is the perfect beverage for a specific situation. So I like them, the ones that we make. I think they're really good, and I think you're sitting out on our patio and the sun is blazing down and you just want a mango seltzer, and it's really good, and there's nothing wrong with that. Which is kind of funny to have to say that, though. It's kind of like that weird hubris of the craft brewing industry to say what we do is the right thing and anything that falls outside of it isn't good. That's such a strange mindset to me, and to have to qualify a statement like that hopefully we get past that as a group and as a community soon.
Okay. I don't disagree with you. I was a naysayer on some of it, early on, but sometimes there is a right there. There's a right situation for everything, and there's a right style, or whatever for for the right moment.
Yeah, when we had like a company party, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, and we were touring the team around the new farm in North Stonington, and of course we had a bunch of Trillium beer there. But then we had we were doing a tour, and we were made it out to the certain point in the field, and in the back of the truck was a bunch of coolers filled with MGD, and everybody was like, "What the hell is this?" And it was like, "Well, just have one." And you're standing out there in the sun, and the wind is blowing through the fields, and everybody's just clinking the bottles, and it was this cool moment. It was like the right beer for the right moment in time, and it felt really celebratory at the time.
It sounds like there's an opportunity there for an MGD style Trillium lager to be consumed at the farm.
Yeah, we already. So it's really cool. We've now been in our second season at the farm. We've done pilot plots of these heritage varieties of dent corn. So we've started making corn lagers, but we're doing it in a way that has this it's much more intentional than just trying to make the beers as cheap and as light as possible. It's actually far more expensive for us to produce this way, of course.
Yeah.
But we can also balance intentional flavor and balancing out the rest of the grist to kind of work with that grain. So it's a very exciting moment for us, and tons of learning is happening, both on the agronomics side as well as in the brewing and kind of sensory perception side and recipe formulation. So that's the stuff that gets really, really exciting to me.
Would that beer taste better out of a bottle?
Yeah, man. If we get one of those kind of like those slim neck clear glass that we get, our quality manager is definitely going to say put that in a big cardboard box. Yeah. But
more in a minute. But first, thanks to the companies that support Drink Beer, Think Beer. This dry January, party on all month long with Athletic Brewing Company's great tasting non-alcoholic craft beer. Order yours at athleticbrewing.com and get free shipping on 2 6-packs or more. Plus, new customers get 10% off with code BeerEdge10. And NZ Hops, a cooperative of master growers whose legend and cultivars have been crafted for over 150 years to produce some of the world's finest hops. NZ hops are like no others, unique in their flavors and aromas. Visit nzhops.co.nz to explore more. Now, back to the conversation.
What else is going on at the farm these days?
So we're kind of slowly taking intentional steps towards the agricultural master plan there. So it's 163 acres of which maybe there's about 80 acres of cropland. So kind of taking land that was either hayed or rotated in with corn back to a state of healthy soil is a very time intensive and labor intensive task. So using regenerative agricultural practices with cover crops, minimal or no disturbance practices to make sure that the soil integrity and the soil ecology has a chance to recover before we start producing. It's an entire discipline. So starting small and taking those super intentional steps to develop a reflection of Trillium's goals and intention is underway, and that involves a pretty complex multi-production system paradigm that starts with livestock through small grains, rotational grazing, kind of windbreaks that have protective windbreaks, and with orchard production and perennial vegetables. And I can't wait to show you one day, John. It's a pretty cool master plan.
No, I'd certainly like to know more about it.
Yeah, the intention is for it to serve as, and it's far too small for what Trillium itself and alone would actually consume. But it's to serve as a learning basis for us to understand how can we grow ingredient in a respectful and regenerative way on the farm that also yields the best possible quality ingredient in a more closed Trillium ecosystem kind of way.
Since you've been growing there, and since you've been walking the land and thinking about what you were just saying, regenerative growth and quality ingredients, do you think, even though the beers that you're making right now aren't benefiting from everything that's coming off of the farm just yet, do you think your beers have changed since you've been more involved in the farm? Are you thinking about your beers in a different way?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I'm thinking about them in a different way. I think it's the same kind of concept and values are still in place. It's just things are becoming more and more coming into focus, and it's more about learning about what the land and the farm is going to be able to offer, and how do we integrate that, and how do we transition that into how we operate. It's really sort of like a farm production logistics kind of question, and then how do we weave that into what we're already doing, and where are the best places and opportunities for us to highlight that, so that it's I don't want to say obvious, but more perceivable to folks that are enjoying what we're doing.
All right, I have 3 bottles on my desk right now as I'm talking to you, and the common word among all 3 in these very nice, beautiful green glass. What are these? 500 milliliter?
Yep.
Is the word is habitat. And there's a beautiful picture of a farm, painting-esque on the front. These beers have been out for a few weeks now, but we haven't talked about them on this show. So for those unfamiliar, what's the quick introduction to Habitat?
Habitat is our series of spontaneously fermented New England ales. So we effectively followed the traditional production method of spontaneous or lambic beers. You'll notice that there's no mention of or use of the word lambic or gueuze anywhere.
Are you part of that method traditional team?
I wish to God that there was an official agreed upon and sign of the cross blessed moniker from that we're able to kind of put in place, but it did not pass muster with the folks who kind of currently hold the torch in Belgium. So, and that I understand why that is. I wish, just like we all kind of wish that there was a little bit more of linking of arms and everybody sings Kumbaya and all that. But I understand, I'm also an adult here and I understand why that didn't come to pass. Ultimately, it becomes much more difficult for us to, as an industry, communicate more broadly to not just the enthusiasts, which probably already know what these are. It's the next level of folks who are more. You're going to be introduced to this kind of beer in our community, so it becomes a little bit more difficult for them to fully understand that if there isn't a common thread across multiple producers. Anyway, that's a long way of saying that. Yeah, it's a long way of saying that these are traditionally produced. We use 100% locally grown and malted barley from our friends at Valley Malt and raw wheat in roughly 60%, 40% proportions. Traditional turbid mash, extended boil, aged hops. The aged hops thing is a funny thing. At some point, the kind of with the relative explosion of spontaneous production by American breweries, the aged hop inventory at the various providers got just totally snapped up, and there was nothing that you could just buy off the shelf as being aged hop. So I did find a producer in the Charles Farm Group in the UK. They did some research for me, and they found a whole bunch of bales in the back of a continental hop grower in Slovenia, and they were willing to have them shipped and then processed into pellets and then shipped on to us. So we've got, I don't know, about 8 or 9 pallets of 8-9-year-old Slovenian continental hops sitting in our warehouse right now, and they're very, very elegant, really, really interesting, very delicate aged hops, and delicate in a way that they're not ultra pungent, kind of like stinky cheese, and that they're more. They lean more towards. Well, I guess it's best if you actually try the beer, because I did not know this until we started producing, because none of the books really talk about it this way. And in my discussions with a handful of spontaneous and lambic producers, they really didn't get into the degree that the hops actually will make up, I don't want to say the lion's share of the aroma and flavor of spontaneous beers, but it is not insignificant. It is a very, very large part of the perception of these kinds of beers.
When you first started thinking about making these beers then, all those years ago, did you have a particular hop in mind? I mean, what you're saying is, you're having, aged Slovenian hops. Like, was that part of the plan, or was it just any old age hop? Was there?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that, when I envisioned it, it certainly was using, buying bales of continental low alpha, landrace varieties of hops, putting them up into a hayloft somewhere, and then coming back 5, 6, 7 years later to have them to use. Now, that while that certainly is the most romantic notion about how to pursue it, it is not entirely necessary. Now, we do, obviously, these are really interesting continental varieties that we have, and they are beautiful, and actually through this process, very uniform. And because they're now in nitrogen mylar packed bags, they are going to be very uniform and consistent for us for the next however many years. So that's a very exciting thing for me. Maybe it doesn't check the box for a lot of people from the romance notion, but I've learned in our 9-ish years here of operating that it's actually best to put aside some of our notions of what the best romantic step or thing could be, because it might be preventing you from making better beer.
Can you go a little bit deeper on that? Because that's fascinating to me, because there is a lot of talk about romance, especially when it comes to spontaneous. And do you think it gets in the way of actually just enjoying the beer?
Yeah, for sure. Well, depending on how you're producing it versus how you're enjoying it, I think one of the things that really, I don't want to say scares me, or like, I really don't want, I don't want to feel like we have to stop making these because nobody is buying them. And there is, again, you're a craft beer enthusiast to a pretty high degree. Yeah. So your enthusiasm for a certain style of beer, maybe Rauch beer might be a good example. How much you love it is not necessarily a reflection of how much the rest of the world loves it.
Sure.
So if you can't, you got to be very realistic in your understanding of what the rest of the world, where they are today and where they're going to be in several years. But if you are blinded by your own passion for something and you just kind of charge down the road because you love it, then you're very much at risk of going down the wrong road.
There's also, though, as much as I am a fan, I feel like I can also be walking into things with a critical eye, and you hear a lot of buzzwords and you can get really excited by it. Like you hear spontaneous or port barrels, or and if you know that a brewery knows what they're doing, there's a certain level of expectation. But then there can also be disappointment, that comes with it as well. Yeah. Who did you make these beers for?
We always make beers for our customers first and then ourselves, because if we're not doing both, then somebody's going to miss out. And that is not to say that that's a compromise. That's an important integrity that we always need to follow. Like I said, if we were only making beers for ourselves, then you need to be a home brewer.
Where do these beers fit into that customer diagram that we were talking about early on? Like for, the folks who line up for your hazy cans or pastry stouts or things like that, like, are they even going to pay attention to this? Did they pay attention to this?
Yeah, I think what's really important is to make sure you've got the understanding that, John, I don't know what your craft beer trajectory has been or where it's going. But it's never a static thing. beers that you just absolutely fell in love with, and were just can't imagine a beer being better than what it was 6 or 7 or 8 years ago, is probably a different thing today. So somebody who just found out about it, or just is trying them for the first time, may really, really, really love hazy beer. And then 3-4 years from now, they may be tired of them and starting to explore traditional saisons or something in the lager world, or British cask beer. Me being who I am, and kind of in the city that I grew up in, I really still love all beer. It's like an annoying answer for a lot of people when they ask me what my favorite kinds of beers are. And I apologize.
It's situational. Yeah, no, but that's, I think that's a smart answer though.
Yeah. It's
an enlightened answer. Yeah.
Well, it's a real one too. It's not posturing for whoever the audience might be. And I also realize my personal preferences are going to continue to evolve and change, and they may narrow, they may widen, or they just may become more, because of my access to beer, which is kind of ridiculous. It may become more preferred situational. Like, I'll be upset if I don't have access to these kinds of spontaneous beers in the future. So that would kind of getting back to that point of, who did we brew these beers for? There's a number of people in the local Boston community that absolutely love spontaneous beers, but the price point and access is pretty limited. And this is really for them. There's not a lot of those people, but that hopefully will change and grow. And I think that there's a lot of people who love these beers, and they don't even know that because they've never tried them before. Yeah. So we're gonna be able to introduce this style of beer to a lot of people, and we take that very seriously. And I think it's an important concept that we aren't just saying, well, we're going to make these beers and we're going to make them for this kind of customer that already loves them, and that's fine. I think that is it's kind of like a thinking that the craft beer customer themselves is a static thing, and it is absolutely not.
And it sounds to me though, if you're going to do a beer like this, it's not enough to just be good enough.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, you're being compared against hundreds of years of tradition. That's no small task, and that's not something to be taken lightly. So quite a lot of this went down the drain, unfortunately. It's super painful, but it's all chalked up to the learning experience of what it even means to start this process.
Is this something
breaking tons and tons of rules as to what this is supposed to be, even though we are following traditional practices. We are racking into 500 and 600 liter puncheons for primary fermentation. And we're learning about what is possible with earlier versus later blending prior to packaging. I think there's a lot to be developed there, and it's super exciting for us to develop a more complex, more consistent spontaneous beer that hopefully has better longevity once it actually is packaged as well.
Is this something you're planning on releasing again later on in 2022?
Yeah, we're hopefully going to be able to, just as we're obviously wort production for spontaneous beer is a seasonal thing. We're gonna look to do a seasonal packaging and a seasonal release as well. Okay.
Have you fired up the cool ship so far this year?
It's scheduled for this week, and it's always weather depending. So this crazy whiplash of it's 2 degrees Fahrenheit. Oh, now it's 50 degrees Fahrenheit is not ideal. We did find through our first few years that mid to late winter spontaneous production is much better than early winter, late fall, and that probably has something to do with reducing the number and types of microbes that we don't want. Moreover than encouraging the types that we do want to start out with primary fermentation.
I love that. That's cool.
Yeah.
I've been asking folks on the show for the last little bit. I've been prefacing it by saying my wife and I were rewatching The Good Place, and there's a scene in the last, in the last season where you can walk through a green door and be anywhere at any time with anybody that you want. And so if such a thing existed on this plane of existence, and you could end this conversation and go walking through a green door into a brewery, into a pub, where would you go and who would you be with?
So I think that in my 45 years now, I've met a number of folks both in the craft beer world and kind of recognizable figures outside of it as well. And the feeling that I've got something to learn from others has largely been displaced with the need to be more introspective and learn from myself. So that being said, I would go back to 2012, the year before we opened Trillium with Esther and our son Luke, because Elena hadn't been born yet. I'd go back to the public house because we used to live just down the street from the public house in Brookline, sitting at our usual table just inside the front door to the right. And I'd probably be coaching myself a little bit about what was to come. I spent the first 3 or so years opening, starting, growing Trillium in an extraordinarily stressed out mind state. And that really, and I talked to lots of new brewery owners about this. And sure, it was fun and it was enjoyable and it was really cool and exciting, but I was probably not super enjoyable to be around in a lot of cases because I was so serious and so stressed out and so I was so consumed by it that I don't know why, but it always felt like it was on a but probably because I was living my life on just like right on the edge, demanding so much of myself, which was not possible. It's not sustainable at all. And a lot of those things kind of feed into how we make decisions and how looking forward, how do we want the rest of my life to be? So I'm not entirely sad that we did go through that. It was a very difficult, painful few years, and nobody ever really saw or heard much about that except for myself and my family. So, and some of my friends. So I'd spend a lot of time talking to myself about how to deal with that, how to be a little bit more gentle with myself so that I could be a better person for others. Sorry if that was way more heavy than we were.
No, it's important to be thinking about. And it's, there's a lot of folks who are embarking on launching a business or, just even just living through the last 2 years of the stress and the worry and talking about this stuff is these issues are really important, and bringing them up and showing that folks aren't alone is really important. So thanks for bringing that up. It's a good reminder.
Any chance that I get to talk to a new business owner or a new brewery, that's getting going, and understanding where they're at, it's a pretty much a common thread about they're all kind of living to some degree in that space of just being completely overwhelmed, not sleeping at night, stressing about are they doing their best for their team, for their customers, and is this all going somewhere, or am I going to just crash and burn? And that's a lot to take on, but particularly if you've never done it before, it's a lot. And I think pretty much everybody just puts on a brave face or just says, I'll just work harder, or I'll sleep less, I'll do whatever needs to happen. And that is how by and large how businesses get going. But having a plan to get out of that at some point is very important, because you can you can sprint for a little while, but you're not sprinting forever.
Yeah.
And you're gonna trade something for that kind of intense energy, either in the short term or in the long term. So you do need to make a decision. You can't just say this is how it is. That's just burying your head in the sand, and it's a terrible, terrible plan. But everything's great now. No, I'm serious. I get to see my kid. I'm with my kids and family every night. I am not, I'm not getting up at 4 a.m. and going into work for 3 hours before starting my day like I used to. I'm not, not coming home from a work trip from going to Sao Paulo for 18 hours, then flying back and then trying to pretend like it didn't happen.
Right. Good.
Yep.
All right.
Everything's terrific.
Yeah. And you got a farm.
I really am. Like I said, it's like I have to come up with a new set of dreams because I'm doing all the things that I dreamed and imagined and hoped would be possible in my lifetime. So, and it's really just getting more detailed with what the dream is and understanding what it actually is. It was some kind of fanciful sort of thing. And now the reality of it is sinking in. And obviously owning and operating a farm is extraordinarily difficult work.
Yeah.
But I enjoy that.
Good. Well, I'm going to let you get back to it then.
Yeah,
and I'll say thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, John. Good to talk to you, man.
What release were you most excited for last year? Or what release are you anticipating this year? Let me know. You can email me. It's John Hall, JOHNHOLL @beeredge.com, or you can reach out on social media. I'm on Twitter @John_Hall. Beer Edge is also on all of the social medias @The Beer Edge. A reminder to join the smoked beer conversation with other enthusiasts on the This Week in Rauch Beer Facebook page or on Twitter and Instagram @TWRauchBeer. And if you're a brewery or a company that wants to support the show and bring original content to the airwaves, you can help us out through advertising by reaching out to Liz Melby. She's at liz@beeredge.com. And speaking of that, thanks to the companies who help keep us on the air. This dry January, party on all month long with Athletic Brewing Company's great tasting, non-alcoholic craft beer. Their full lineup of craft styles lets you drink up and stay dry while keeping things fresh. And with brews starting at only 50 calories, you can stick to your resolutions all while saying cheers. Join the party at athleticbrewing.com and get free shipping on 2 6-packs or more. Plus, new customers can get 10% off with code BEEREDGE10. We're also brought to you by NZ Hops, a cooperative of master growers, whose legend and cultivars have been crafted for over 150 years with creativity and passion to produce some of the world's finest hops. With a dedicated hop breeding program and farming knowledge handed down through the generations, the current day master growers proudly provide 18 unique New Zealand hop varieties to the world. Visit nzhops.co.nz or find them on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn @NZHops Ltd to learn more. Final reminder, check out the Beer Edge podcast with Andy Crouch. New episodes come out weekly. Steal This Beer has new episodes every Monday, and the BYO Nano podcast drops on the 15th of every month. Back here, Nate Schweber performs our theme music, Jeff Quinn designed our logo, and I'm John Hall. New episodes release every Wednesday, and that's when I'm going to be back again to drink beer and to think beer.